Gosh.
Sometimes it's more interesting to ask the question, which ones did you dislike?
Don't get me going on those. Stravinsky,
Ah,
Wagner, Liszt.
oh, really? I
That
can
was
see where maybe I will use that. Here goes the introduction. Actually, you're going to help me too, of course. This is Guy Meyer here with California Times, and I've got two very interesting guests from California. I have Deb Baber. Deb, you're going to help me with the introduction. I met you at the Republican convention in Burlingame, where I was a associate delegate. I am a new Republican. I hardly know where exactly I fit in this world. I'm still treasure my sense of independence, but I put my foot in that door. I feel like I'm kind of a environmentalist looking for the Republican principles. Deb, what are you doing? What's going on in your life? Are you running some kind of a MAGA event for the Republican Party?
Well, I'm not running a MAGA event per se, but rather I'm the treasurer, elected treasurer of the county GOP in Ventura County.
Okay.
It's my second term being elected to the GOP, the county GOP, and now I'm treasurer. So that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
And within that, the Ventura County Republican Party ran a slate of 19 people for 22 seats. We wiped them out. We took all 19 seats. So we are an America First, hard America First Republican committee here in California.
Okay. All right. And that's Ventura County, which is
Correct.
just for those who don't know, it's borders Los Angeles County, and is that right?
It's about 65 miles north of Los Angeles and about 50 miles south of Santa Barbara.
Okay. And does it include the coast? It does, doesn't it?
Yes, it's on the coast. I mean, so we've got the coast, and then we moved all the way over to Simi Valley, where, of course, the Reagan Library is.
Right. All right. And I'm also here with Mamie. You might have to help me again. Pechenuk?
Yeah, you got it right.
Really? That's amazing.
Yep,
All right. Now, Mindy, uh, you are sitting in a home in Oakland. Is that correct?
correct.
And tell me about what you've been involved with recently in
Well, there's a couple of things. One of which Deborah and I have very much connected on is we run a movement called California MAGA. And we meet every Friday night on Zoom for 2 hours, 7 to 9. And we've been doing this for over 2.5 years. It started when Trump was running for president, and we didn't see the party really organizing a statewide movement to support Trump. So we jumped in and formed California MAGA. And it's ongoing and it's growing and it's pulling people together. Also, I am a candidate for mayor of Oakland for the November 2026 election. I'm also a member of the Alameda Central Republican Central Committee. And I've been a political activist my entire adult life and fighting for the American system, which is what Trump is trying to do to the Republican Party, is to make it the party of the working class, to make it the party of what Lincoln wanted to have why he started the Republican Party. And Deborah Baber, who's a great designer of these buttons we have on, and this one says, let me just take it out for a minute because I can't read upside down too well. It says, MAGA Republicans created equal, inalienable rights established in 1854, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I'll hold it up so people can see it a little better.
that works. It's quite visible. Uh,
Yes. And Deborah designed it.
oh my. Okay. Now, so you've been active all your years, you say, adult years in politics. Were you always a Republican?
No. In fact, I was a Democrat. I was a Democrat for most of my adult life, up until about 2010. And then I became an independent. And then because of Trump, I became a Republican.
Wow. That's that's a transformation. Though I think there are many people uh, in America that have experiencing something similar to that what you've gone through. The country's changed so much. Um, what do you, Deb? What do you when you say America first? Tell us how would you explain the principles that you see in Trump and that you endorse in that statement there? What do you mean? What do you mean?
So the principle, first, I think it really is important for us to talk about the definition of principles versus values. And this is something that Mindy helped schooled me on over 2 years ago. And let me illustrate it this way. A principle is eternal. A principle is forever. A value can be fleeting. It's an interpretation of the principle in everyday world. So let's take, for instance, there is the principle of gravity. Gravity exists. You can jump up and down. You can get on a plane. If you value travel, you can get on a plane and go somewhere. But eventually you will have to come to grips with the principle of gravity again. So principles are eternal. Values are that interpretation in those moments of time of those eternal principles. And so, with that, the America First agenda as a principle is really about the same thing as your family. So, in your family, if most of us put ourselves and our family first. And that essentially is what President Trump has been encouraging America to do on the world stage and at home. So wherever you are, if we can think of it in those terms so that people can better grasp what we're talking about, if you would do something first for your family before you would somebody else, or you want to make sure your family is fed before you feed other people, or you want to make sure that they are closed and housed and properly made safe before you would other people. And then once you've done that, you do it for others, fantastic. That's the America First principle, the principle or the value. The principle is, as Mindy also often says, we're made in God's image, and we were made to walk the earth, find a mate, and procreate. And that is our purpose in life, and that is a principle that is eternal.
Would, so, all right, Mindy, you are being a bit of a source of wisdom here. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, are those values then?
No, those are actually principles in my book.
Okay.
Because, and that's why very few people know where the pursuit of happiness comes from. It comes from Leibniz, who was a
Excuse me,
great
from where?
by a great man named Leibniz.
Oh,
Who
Leibniz.
he lived in the 1600s, and he was a great scientist and a great philosopher. And he was one of the mentors, not because they knew each other, but came later, of Benjamin Franklin. He was very known to the founding fathers. He was actually known and very much published by Ben Franklin and the other circles of Franklin's junta during his time to lay the principles of our nation. And when they talk about pursuit of happiness, they're not talking about running around and doing something crazy. They're not talking about what is your valued desire to go see a movie. They're not talking about those kinds of things. They're talking about what is the pursuit of happiness that makes us, as Deborah just said, in the image of the Creator God, which is a beautiful creative mind that God did not give to. I love my puppy dog, but he doesn't have the creative mind I have. You have, Deborah has, that we all have as human beings. To discover those universal principles that are invariant, and actually then in the discovery, you actually, just to give you an example to make it concrete, at one point, oil was just sloshy stuff in the ground. It didn't do very much. But man's discovery of oil and what it could do to increase our energy capabilities, just as new those, and every development goes a little bit further than the previous one. And, and if we hadn't discovered kerosene at one point, we wouldn't have made it to oil. But then kerosene became obsolete because it was inefficient to the new developments that organized our society. And that's the principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that Ben Franklin and the founding fathers understood, which is why they took from Leibniz, who wrote a whole essay called The Pursuit of Happiness, and took that into the American declarations and constitution of our country, because this was the real foundings of our nation. And what's been under attack is that pursuit of happiness, what makes us the image of God, and the destruction of that understanding and those principles, which has been the political battle, which Donald Trump is the champion of today, who actually understands that is the fight. So just to, I could go on, but I won't. But to
Yeah, no,
answer
you
your
are.
question a little bit
It,
more,
I would add to what Mindy said. So we're talking about life that's defined well enough, and that's a principle. And we have pursuit of happiness, which she was just discussing, but then we have liberty. So it's not life, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness. It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If you think about it, you never say you are at free to do this, but you are at liberty to think. You are at liberty to believe. You are at liberty to engage. Now, when I say that, you may not be free to engage physically because perhaps you have some physical issue that prevents you from walking. So your ability to engage freely is not there, but you are at liberty to engage your mind. You are at liberty to engage ideas with others. You are at liberty to do those things. Not always free to do them, but you are at liberty to do them.
I'm not sure I 100% get. I know though there's fine points of what. Needless to say, I treasure a sense of liberty and a sense of freedom, and sometimes I'm not sure I know the difference of the two words, but we all are, even at this point in time here. For me, inviting you to join this talk podcast show that I have and to share it with the world. This is an act of freedom and of choice, and it's, we are challenged by what our world wants us, how our world wants us to conform. That pressure of human conformity is part of sometimes part of a social group who maintain, that's how it works. So anyways, exactly, when we have to use this liberty, I would say, to maintain our freedom. We have to take that opportunity, even if we are a minority, to speak our mind with as much courage we have, particularly when we're way in the minority.
Well, I might also add that we're very grateful for this opportunity to talk about this, because something that Mindy and I certainly are fierce about is our words. The choice of words, how you use words, and the recognition, the fulsome recognition that totalitarians use words as weapons. They use words to move the culture, to ignite emotional responses, to destabilize individuals. And so for us, sometimes it becomes necessary to define your terms so that when you're working on a project or you are trying to convey an idea, if you don't start from a common place of understanding, then you can be misunderstood, or you might be miscommunicate if that's what you're attempting to do. So it becomes really important to define your terms and make sure that people are using the same vocabulary to describe the
Well,
same thing
and
or the
this
same
goes on
idea.
all the time, doesn't it? I mean, the use of, I guess they call that semantics, correct? Where
Well, it's
we
more
can,
than
you find words, many words mean much the same thing, but some words will have a connotation, like if something is attacked, where
so
that
for
could be.
instance, let's ask the question. It's supposedly Pride Month. Pride in what? Who developed this Pride Month? Well, the homosexual community developed a multicolor flag. What do you use flags for? You use flags to claim territory. Think about planting the American flag on on another country, or other countries in the past planting their flag in another place. So it's about claiming territory. So I personally, and not everybody agrees with this, of course, but I am working hard to discipline myself to speak in very specific and very direct language, much in the way that I believe that President Trump does. And so I don't talk about it being a gay pride month, but I talk about it being flying the multicolor homosexual agenda flag. That is what that is. Because what is the pride? What is the pride? And the word they talk about, the rainbow flag. Well, the rainbow has some significant and very powerful connotations in the biblical world and in the stories in the Bible and other great stories throughout the world. And for a small, and I'm going to use the word abnormal, and I'm going to get back to that in a moment, an abnormal portion of the population to have captured so many of our government institutions who now fly that multicolored homosexual agenda flag over public property and have compelled people to claim a 30-day Pride Month in honor of a multicultural idea is really an example of how a small group of people has used language to weaponize and their agenda and to capture the people that they want to promote that agenda.
All right.
And when I say normal, let me just make this point clear because I know that this gets blowback from a lot of people who don't then hear what I mean by that. When I say homosexuals are not normal, now it is normal to the individual. Yes, it may be normal to them, but it is not normal to mankind. In the same way that I have a grandson who has a very unusual, very significant disease that makes him incapable of standing, feeding himself. Basically, he will die probably before he's 17 or 18 years old. For him, that is a normal condition. But for mankind, that is not a normal condition. And it is in that that I'm trying to make the distinction because one's sexuality is not relevant in our politics if you're not trying to push that sexuality onto others. It should have no place there. And that's what I mean by normal versus not normal.
All right. Mindy, do you want to follow that up briefly? So we don't want to spend too much time on this. I want to say something too, but I want to hear how you would take this any further. You're welcome to.
Okay, I'll just be brief in it, but I'll just add one thing in that I was thinking about as Deborah was speaking. And it comes like even in this current discussion on what President Trump is doing on the immigration policy and the deployment of the National Guard and the deployment of the question of ICE. And this is I was just in a discussion here yesterday with the Board of Supervisors, Alameda County Board of Supervisors, who were hearing all these people coming up saying, I represent this group. I'm here to get $700,000 because we got to protect the immigrants from ICE. We got to protect the immigrants from ICE. And I got up and made a comment. And I also put out a press release on my campaign for mayor. Two things. One, this idea that they're immigrants is not the same as illegals. And that's a very big, again, use of the word that Deborah's bringing up. So they always talk about as if they're immigrants, as opposed to talking about the fact that they're illegal. They came into the country illegally. A lot of them are criminals and they're violent. It's not the same as my immigrant grandfather and grandmother who escaped from Ukraine in 1913 and went to Ellis Island and became legal citizens of the United States. They were immigrants, my grandparents. But so the confusion in people's minds is just how they create the fear and the hysteria, the enemy does, is by confusing illegals with immigrants as if they're going after every immigrant that ever came into the country. And that's just another example that I would raise, just to be brief. I could say more, but to be brief.
Okay, yeah, no, I appreciate it. I will say that I recognize what your feelings and you're talking about. I too, regarding the rainbow flag, as somebody who grew up, of a earlier generation grew up with the Rainbow Peoples tribe. Then there was the Jesse Jackson and the Rainbow Peoples Coalition. The rainbow is sometimes it feels like, where did this become the official symbol? I mean, I don't mean, it's just one of those things, and it becomes, as I say, as you say, maybe a message of agenda, and I would say a kind of a uniting factor. I will put this into anybody who is gay or involved in that. There certainly has historically been a lot of prejudice and that could be harmful. There is a battle for a sense of self-expression that I think the gay pride thing might represent. I also would say that the full battle is for all of us to become Americans and to put whatever secondary identifications of individuality or this or that, funnel them in to rising up to become part of this country and be Americans. I think we certainly are lacking that right now as we're divided in so many directions.
Which that would suggest that we might flip the word, so it's not African American, it's American African, American Italian, American Greek, so that the operative word becomes American first. But here's something specific to the African American term. That has been used categorically to describe people with dark skin. I suspect that somebody from Haiti or somebody from Jamaica or somebody else from Panama, for instance, that they don't necessarily, if they had a choice to be called a Jamaican American or American Jamaican versus an African American, they likely would choose their heritage because human nature, what it is, we tend to cleave to things that are familiar to us, that are part of our frame of reference. But they've never been given that opportunity. And interestingly enough, back in the 19th century, the word to describe the Black population in this country very often was called the sable-colored people.
Disabled?
No, sable, S-A-B-L-E.
Oh,
The sable-colored people. So once again, what we have is humanity attempting to have a communication, a conversation, a defining of your terms. If we were saying, if we were here, if one of us had dark skin and we described to somebody that we just participated in a 3-panel discussion, 2 of us had white skin and were female, and 1 of us had black skin. Well, in the 19th century, you might have said 2 of us were white and female, and 1 of us had sable-colored skin. It becomes important for us to really understand the nature of words. And let's remember that phrase. In the beginning, there was the word. And that, I think, becomes operative for us because we're the only species that speaks.
In the human language.
But is it in the human language? But going back to what Mindy said at the very beginning, her puppy can't do all that we can do, can't be the creative souls that we can. And so language, what we're talking about, the language was given to human beings to communicate in such a broad, vast, and creative fashion. Whereas the language of whales or the language of wolves, those languages, it's a way of communication. Language is just a descriptive way of saying it because people can relate to that. They understand it when you say language.
All right. Well, many people who are involved in environmental, or perhaps it's anthropomorphizing. What's the term when we put our human beliefs, thinking that a whale might act like a human or whatever? But indeed, many scientists do say, all right, well, these animals have a consciousness. Our dog, our cat, Every animal has a consciousness and a form of communication within their own group. We cannot know, we just simply cannot know the subtlety. We can accept, I think, at faith that nothing is more developed or complicated or magical as the human lexicon, and maybe the English language. We could get into that. I think the English language is one of the, isn't it the language on the planet that has the most words? It's, but I'm not sure if that, I'm not trying to trumpet that up as something that, but I certainly love the English language and the heritage it brings. Let's get back into America First thing and a couple of more things I want to talk about in terms of your love and respect for President Trump, who in many things I do appreciate what he's doing, and in many things I feel like I end up flinching or cringing or believing that I wish he had a few more people to talk to in his office that was giving him some different advice. I guess we're talking about wisdom in many ways to how to navigate these times of what makes America first. Again, you mentioned family and community, this and the nation, but certainly as a community, when I walk out the door and I see my same familiar neighbors every other day, I can't say how important they are to me, how important it is that I don't have people in my neighborhood or community who are living under a rose bush, or, I don't want that for my own self-interest, for my family's self-interest. We need to have the greater community to be functioning. We really do need it. And what level there, I think, is the wisdom part of saying that in order to achieve our own personal goals, we have to make sure that they're not personal goals at the expense of anybody else in my community, don't we?
Well, I'll say something to that, and then Deborah should jump in. That gets back what you're raising, Guy, and I appreciate this discussion because these are the kind of discussions we need to have. And so this is excellent, first of all. This gets back to the question of principle. And it gets back to the question of why was our nation founded in the first place? What is it to have a real republic where we're not all going to be the same, but the mission should be the same. It should be it's universal. The mission of being in the image of God is universal. It doesn't matter if you're black, if you're white, if you're whatever. It's a universal understanding. And this is where it gets back to what our founding fathers understand, which I believe is what Trump is trying to do. And the reason a lot of people don't understand President Trump is because they don't understand the kind of strategic mind that he has, and that he's dealing with a lot of moving parts at one time, which I recommend people read his book, The Art of the Deal, because it actually teaches you a lot about how Trump thinks and why he thinks. But it also gets back to the same question, we were talking about earlier. We were talking about the fact that I have Bach on the music stand back there, which is that a really truly musical mind, a philosophical mind like Washington had, George Washington I'm talking about. I'm talking about Benjamin Franklin. I'm talking about the deep thinkers, Alexander Hamilton, who founded the principles of our country, which they were steeped in things that people aren't steeped in anymore today. They knew Plato. They knew the Renaissance. They knew Leibniz. They knew there was a fundamental ordering principle to the universe. Man didn't create that ordering principle. We didn't create man. We didn't create the puppy dog. There was a God, the creator. This is what Leibniz talked about. It comes from outside of the particular, and these principles are there for us to discover. And each generation is part, and that used to be the idea of a family. In the early days of the country, in the early days even, I'm going to be 74 this year. In the early days, there was an idea that a family, you had your children, you had one bread earner in the family. And that's something that Trump, I think, wants to get back to. That's something we need to. Because the fact that the country is going through a demographic collapse, as a lot of countries are right now, because you've had this assault against these principles that used to be totally knowable. And so that if you get back to, and this is what Trump is doing with how he's dealing with bringing back, I believe a clean environment through nuclear power and fusion development and the space program, which brings us into cohesion with these new universal principles to be discovered. And that's how mankind has always advanced. At one time, just to conclude, this idea, at one time, discovering fire was a discovery to mankind 10,000 years ago. You had this crazy thing that was burning things down, but how did man discover the ability to harness that fire and create that fire in a controlled way that could advance, in those days, his community, which was obviously tribal, but to advance his culture, to change his whole eating habits, to change how he could produce tools, to think how he could produce clothing, which I guess 10,000 years ago might not have been a big thing, but, to produce these kinds of things.
Let me,
Go ahead.
I'm going to
Go ahead,
put a
Guy.
pause there. And I think you're hitting on that, as you describe it, the principle that there is a divine template, almost might say, of what we all are a part of. This whole planet, all life, and within that, to me, that would advise us, that would offer us a path forward, or a path simply even just in a daily, not even thinking of the abstract progress of 5 or
Right.
10 years, but simply how do we deal with every day one at a time, in a way that it respects this underlying harmonic music, as you have apparently put your life involved with music, Mindy. So with that said, the nuclear thing, to me, the issues going on with the green energy, I have great questions of where they're taking us. I think the same questions should be directed to nuclear energy. If we're putting something in little containers that have to be stored safely for 50,000 years, then I question, to me, that maybe the underlying principle, God, has a better plan. That maybe we don't, maybe there's energy even that we wouldn't have to be putting 1,000 years from now. Is a heck of a who cares, right? I could say anything on this nowadays, but I feel like we potentially, as a culture and as a civilization, could find energy that is really definitely safe, and it's there. It needs a liberation of creativity and thinking. And it's, again, like where are we going in terms of Wall Street, or must we ever expand civilization? I won't talk too much more time, but there's a group called Association of Bay Area Governments. You familiar with it, Mindy and Deb?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
There's something in Ventura County too.
There's the
Right, where
Association
they
of
are
Southern
continually
California Governments.
Right, they're continually pushing this model of basically forcing communities to expand with their vision they have. That and then they just come out with a report today, and I find it to be sort of the opposite, almost like, again, with that harmonic. You're going against this harmonic. You're telling us that we have to, we have to expand to another 1 million people in the Bay Area, in 10 years or 20 years. I question that. I think, like, what if we used our thought processes to say, what is the carrying capacity? How does your community get better instead of getting, to me, worse, which is more dense?
Let me
Go ahead,
let me
Deb.
offer this very quick observation, and that is what happens when you put too many mice in the same cage? What happens to the mice? They start to fight each other. So are we immune to that kind of conflict?
No, I don't think so.
I argue that we are not immune to it,
Mhm.
but that the civilizing nature of the American system of government and republic, predicated and based in law and order and justice, gives us the greatest opportunity for civility in a crowded cage. And to what you're talking about, the organization you're talking about, they have one in Southern California, and I think they have two or three others, one for the Inland Empires. But you're talking about an organization that was created that operates, it masquerades as some kind of important auxiliary feature of government. And it sells itself like that because it has lured elected officials lulled them into believing that they need to be part of it and they need to talk to each other. Well, excuse me, but the way to govern in this nation is you're supposed to be talking to your constituents. So if you've got abundant water and no land, the conversation you need to have is about your constituents and how you help to make that community first. Not one, not, you're not working to also work with a community that doesn't have the same profile. And so I often liken it to also, there are things like the National Association of Secretaries of State. Again, it masquerades as an official government body. It is not. It is a nonprofit. It's an NGO. However, there are a lot of secretaries of states in the United States that belong to them. Well, they're not. Let's take elections for a moment. The secretaries of state, we don't need California Secretary of State talking to Arkansas about how to run elections. California is California. Arkansas is Arkansas. If Shirley Weber, the Secretary of State, has questions about how to properly run California, she should be asking Californians. She shouldn't be talking to her counterparts about how to get that part done. But it is through those mechanisms, like SCAG, like the National Association, that people have been conditioned into believing are official bodies, that they are able to promulgate the propaganda that then becomes the truth for some people. The propaganda about climate change, that sort of thing. They're just tools.
Go ahead, Mindy.
I'm going to just add on one thing. Thanks, Deborah. To this, just to go back to something you also raised, Guy, that I'd like to talk a little bit about, which is this question of nuclear energy. And I've been involved in this for over 50 years. It's a real science of discovery. And where the nuclear plants are today, it's not like the nuclear plants of, 40 years ago. There's completely new technologies. You don't have the same problems of all the saving of the spent fuel and all this. And 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 if we had fusion, and if we progress to the next step, see what both nuclear and fusion represents are breakthroughs again in human discovery of new physical principles, as was electricity at first. And if once we get to fusion, you could actually burn a lot of the waste in a fusion torch. But they don't, but the new pebble reactors and these kind of reactors are completely different, run on different principles than what we had with 3 Mile Island or anything in the past. And the whole campaign, and I want a clean environment too, but my pathway to that and my problems with things like, so, if you want to put a solar panel on your house, God bless you, go do it. But solar energy, wind power does not have the energy density that you need to run an actual industrial manufacturing civilization, let alone AI, but that's a whole other story. I don't want to go to that right now,
It's a
of
huge story.
society.
It's
And
a big story. Yeah, AI is
yeah,
that's
yes, I don't
another
want to go into
hour
that now. That's a
show.
whole, we'll have another show on that. But it is the question of what the principle, since we've been talking about principle, invariant in how God ordered the universe. And I'll use a term that most people are not used to. It's negentropic. See what we've been, there's two different schools of thought, one right and one wrong. What Ben Franklin, Donald Trump, Alexander Hamilton understood is that the universe is not entropic. We're not going down. The universe responds and is created to go, if you want to say anti-entropic or negentropic, it has to go to higher orders of the good. It has to go to higher orders of new principles. That's why we're still not using kerosene lamps today. This is why Bach's discovery aided what Mozart did and what Beethoven did. And they took it and developed the language a little bit differently, but it's based on these principles. And so it's the same thing in science. And the school of science that used to be known, that was fought out, what Einstein represented, what people like scientists like Riemann, name you don't even hear today anymore, you know, and and others like them, was this anti-entropic school of thought. This is what Leibniz came out of. This is what Benjamin Franklin, our founding fathers, like Ben Franklin, understood. That's why our people don't, but Ben Franklin was a scientist in this tradition. So George Washington was a great scientist in agriculture. People don't realize the great discoveries that he made in agriculture. And so the attack against the United States, I'll just use the United States, but it's universal. The attack against our country, since it was established on those principles, was an attack to it with each generation to push us further away from knowing these principles, scientifically, culturally, and to replace them with a school of thought which is based on today what I would call British liberalism, the schools of what is sense perception, the school that is mechanical, like we all learned in school, which is
Darwin.
Darwin, yes. Which is we all grew up in school, in elementary school. Well, we know gravity because Newton said an apple fell on your head. Well, Newton was a fraud. He was stealing because Kepler discovered the gravitational principles through this anti-entropic method I'm talking about. And so the enemy, the oligarchy, the deep state, whatever you want to call them, globalists, wanted to push us away from this knowledge, which was the foundations. And what President Trump is trying to do is to bring that back. That's America first. That's the family.
Well,
That's the education of our children.
yeah. Well,
I'll stop there.
I think we have to come back to our roots, and to me, I think you hit on it. Where I completely agree that there is this template, this harmonic, this principle. You call it God. All right. Maybe the other people have different names for that.
Right.
They want to prefer to just call it the great mystery, or some people can just say it's that what I don't believe in. Oh, well, what you don't believe in is all right. What you don't believe in might still be there, whether you believe in it or not. But we're sitting on such a contentious and ready to blow each other up over ideologies.
Right.
So common. I mean, this is what the world is going on. I mean, what's going on in the Mideast. Jew, Christian, Muslim, Republican, Democrat. We've got to find a way. To me, it's getting back to that template. And also, I guess I'd sort of like I don't think I was ever a hippie, but I bought into a lot of the optimistic, I would say, consciousness vision of what was in the 60s and 70s. And it really had to do with creating a very environmentally conscious world and a world of liberty. It was a fundamental part of that revolution. Now, liberty, I don't think, goes anywhere without a sense of responsibility. They're the two sides of the same coin. but it's maybe I'm getting ready to wrap this up. Deb, you chime in with something that you're thinking of to help wrap it up.
So I want to go to the words that you said. Let's get back to the roots of things. I would encourage everybody that sees this to spend a moment thinking about this. What relative of yours, your uncle, your aunt, your grandmother, your grandfather, what relative of yours influenced your life greatly? I know Mindy has a wonderful story about her grandmother. Think about that, but then I want you to think about who influenced Donald Trump's science side? Who was it that made Donald Trump aware of light therapies that he talked about and was ridiculed when COVID first came to town? He was ridiculed about the use of bleach, which is actually a hydrogen peroxide reaction that happens with a certain kind of ingestion of vitamin C that you take into your body. It's a natural occurrence. Who was that? It was his Uncle John, for whom he's named Donald John Trump. His Uncle John was a scientist, a world-renowned scientist out of MIT, and in fact was when MIT wanted to curate Nikola Tesla's papers, it was PhD, Dr. John Trump that they asked to do that. And Donald Trump spent a lot of time talking with his uncle, engaged with his uncle, and learning science. And many people don't know that.
And I'll
Okay.
add one quick comment on that
Sure.
to wrap it up on and it was Dr. John Trump, his uncle, who, when Trump was a young man, had a good, deep conversation with him. And he says, you must never allow nuclear war to happen.
Right.
Nuclear war is unthinkable and what it will do. And that's why President Trump today is fighting so hard to do everything to bring peace to this world among many different ideologies or many different beliefs. But again, it gets back to what you said, Guy, the template. There is a template, a God-ordered template. Trump believes that. And remembers those wise words, both in terms of the positive side of the science that Deborah's referencing, and also his warning about you can never allow a nuclear war to occur. And that's what he's trying to avoid right now.
One other thing as part of the wrap up, then over to you again, Guy, is
It can be a little
again,
long wrap up.
I would encourage people to think about this, envision this. The oldest trees in the world are the sequoia, the redwood trees. They are also the tallest trees.
Bristlecone pine.
And they don't know how old they are. They project that they could be 3,000 to 5,000 years old, some of them having grown even when Jesus walked the earth during the whole biblical thing. That sequoia tree, it has a very, very shallow root system. So here you're talking about thousands of feet in the air, I don't know, hundreds of feet around, with a very, very shallow root system. And that sequoia tree, it can, at the tip of your thumb is the seed, the size of a sequoia tree, a redwood tree seed, the tip of your thumb. And that sequoia tree became what it did with water and sunshine. And if we start to go back to the essence of all things, where do we come from? Why do we walk the earth? We were born to find a mate and to procreate, our purpose in this world. And one of the greatest divisions that the totalitarians, and I call them toadies, an ugly image for an ugly group of people, but is the greatest division in the world is between men and women, because everybody in the world is one or the other. And when you start to introduce things like women are being oppressed, women are being subjugated, men are being whatever, the oppressors, then you are dividing us at the essence of why we are walking the earth. We walk the earth to find a mate and to procreate. And if we are filling the culture with conflict between the sexes, we naturally, or we will, as we have, become dysfunctional as a result.
Well, that's a very that's a powerful thought, and thank you for expressing that, Deb. I just want to send this as a thought too regarding peace and President Trump's efforts in that regard. I do send a wish and a prayer, and I want to acknowledge to many people who do not know that Trump, during his first administration, did a number of things that no other president that I had witnessed in my life had done in terms of acting relatively nonviolently when he had an option. And toward the end of his first term, he had negotiations attempting to happen between the Soviet Union, Russia, and China and the U.S. He wasn't able to get China on board to talk about nuclear reduction on a bigger level. And I do hope and encourage him, if he should choose to listen, to find out such fascinating supporters and intelligent people as Mindy and Deb here. You should listen to this and get right back on it, because we're looking forward to that. I remember that, I think in the 70s or 80s in Playboy magazine interview, where he said, I could negotiate that treaty, you know, he was talking about Reagan. I could get it done, you know, and I think he had that attitude back then. And,
Yep.
As Mindy said, when you read his book, you know he did.
Yeah.
When you read his book, you understand the foundation on which this man is making decisions and running this country. And the other thing that I encourage people to think about is think about what you know, and then think about what you don't know. And then remember, Donald Trump knows a whole lot more than you do, because he has all of the information coming at him and coming to him. And so everybody, I love to give this imagery as well. Everybody is an armchair politician.
All right.
You don't have armchair cardiologists or proctologists, but you do have armchair politicians, and that's everybody. And so everybody can do it better, differently, whatever.
And that's the way it's always been. That's the way it's always been. Every president that's ever found his way to that role is going to have that in America. And, you know, I think it's okay that Americans question, disagree, or whatever. I think he needs that of us also. I think he needs that of us also. As my mom said, here's wisdom for you. Everybody has some of the truth. Nobody has all of the truth. And, you know.
And I think that that's where Donald Trump absolutely respects the American system of government, because the American system of government gives Americans the opportunity to bring their armchair to the table alongside other people in their armchairs. So we can all be armchair politicians next to each other. And we must learn, again, to govern alongside each other, not despite each other.
Right.
That's the big thing. And I believe that President Trump is working heroically to try and bring that model of governance back to the United States.
And our long wrap-up is really getting very close to being finished here. And I think that if we could all, you know, in that conversation of the family, Trump in his inauguration did say to America, we are one people, and we need to recognize that opinions or ideas, even when they're wrong, can be corrected. That's one of his, I think, attributes, where he's admitted in the past he's made these changes. We all can. As we look at the progressives or whatever, people who we disagree with, you know, strongly, or maybe in my case, some Republicans, maybe I'll disagree. We all we all change in some levels. It's not condemn each other to be, you are a stone that's hopelessly and whatever. No. Anyways, I think that's going to have to be it. Is that okay, ladies?
Oh,
I've had a
that's
great
great.
time.
And hope
Yeah,
to see you Guy in the September convention.
we look,
Well, I might just do that. I haven't taken part in your MAGA Zoom. I
You're welcome on it.
I want a clean sweep in California. I mean, I want something really different really soon. It's getting really weird. But I do want. I want it. I don't want my Republicans to be into the heavy development machine either. I got to say, but that's another topic perhaps. But we gotta take care of the planet. I'm stuck on that. So
We can.
cheers. All right. Thanks so much.
Great.
And
Thank
I'll just
you.
say
thank you.
goodbye and we'll
Thanks.
talk later on, huh?
Okay,
Thank
for
you.
sure.
Okay. Bye bye.
All right.
Cheers.
Thanks
Bye.
again.
Bye bye.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.